I'd like to reframe this question of high-speed rail. I think it has a much bigger impact. It is really, in the end, the foundation of the American dream. How we move around frames up the kinds of communities we build. Since the 50s, when we put in place the Federal Highway Act and we built basically an automobile culture, we can see that the fundamental investment in our transportation system is what drives the nature, quality, and type of communities and housing we build. We, of course, have progressed, or many people would think have regressed. But in the 60s, when we were kind of at a certain kind of peak in terms of international reputation and livability, and when the American dream as we know it, the cul-de-sac and the single-family dwelling was born, we lived a much more frugal life. We only had one car per household. We traveled around 10,000 miles. We spent just 13% of our income on housing. And of course, we were no worse off for it. What has happened is that we have arrived at a disconnect between who we are and the kinds of communities we build and the kinds of transportation networks that support it. In fact, I will make the point that the recession that we're looking at today is largely a response of our land use policies, not just financing gimmicks. Why do we need to change? Not just environmental, not just carbon, not just climate change, but who we are has changed. We're only 25% of the population now, families with kids. The one-size-fits-all, large lot, single-family dwelling is no longer what the market needs. In fact, this was a study done in 2006 by Chris Nelson, and he showed the demand in the year 2025, which is the green bar, and the blue bar, which is supply today in housing, showed a demand for attached, a demand for small lot, the cottages and bungalows that used to fill up our streetcar suburbs. But that, and he showed this in 2006, we had already overbuilt large lot single family. There was a profound mismatch between our economics and our demographics and the kind of housing and the kinds of communities and the kinds of lifestyles we were propagating. And of course, he predicted in that paper in '06 that perhaps there was going to be a realignment in real estate values, which we now know have happened. So I think that we're undershooting when we think of high-speed rail and infrastructure investments merely as a technology to move people. It is the thing that lays the groundwork for the kind of communities that are possible. And it's not just transit-oriented development at the station itself. It's a whole web of land use patterns that grow out of that today have to fit with our economics and our demographics in a more profound way. So this is a real pivot point. And I think high-speed rail has to be seen in relationship to this larger pivot point, this larger economic challenge that we have, and the real challenge of affordability on a household level. Here's, if you take median income and you take 50% of it, which is what it costs the average household in real estate costs and transportation costs, if you have a three-car household, the majority of the money goes into the automobiles. These are lifestyles that can no longer be sustained. If you have a more urban lifestyle over on the far right, you can see that the value that we can invest in real estate goes up. So I don't think we should detach where we are with our transportation systems from these larger issues of housing and the economy. Now, we have a whole series of metrics that come into play. It's not just the cost difference between the high-speed rail and new airports and highways. It's the cost difference between two different lifestyles that will inevitably emerge. So how do we do this? We develop scenarios that look at different growth patterns and measure their impacts. So let's take one, business as usual, 70% typical sprawl, 25% compact, kind of streetcar suburb type development, and only 5% urban infill. And let's compare that to growing smart or transit-oriented development or whatever you want to call it, but a set of land use patterns that are a better fit to our economics today, which would be 55% streetcar suburbs. These are still single-family neighborhoods, but more compact, more walkable, and higher levels of transit service. 35% urban and only 10% sprawl. We've overbuilt sprawl. It's going to take a decade to absorb the overhang of where we are today. There's no demand for any more of it. And so the question really is, where do we go from here? So those three types that we're mixing in these scenarios, standard looks like a place in San Ramon, compact, Rockridge is a historic streetcar suburb served by BART, and urban San Francisco. Let's look at the qualities of those places. Housing, San Ramon, we know it. It's all large lot, single family, subdivisions, cul-de-sacs. There's no way from A to B without getting in an automobile. Rockridge, those historic streetcar suburbs, some of them which have come back to life because they got new transit investments, are among the most valued and desirable communities, at least in the Bay Area region. San Francisco, a thriving urban environment. The shopping world, of course, goes from mall to Main Street to mixed-use Main Street, and jobs go from office parks, where you're stranded if you don't take a car, to mixed-street, walkable environments, and, of course, central business districts. Now, here are the striking numbers. The carbon footprint is 3 to 1, as you can see, between San Francisco, and you can see that that streetcar suburb, that wonderful middle ground that we invented in America, performs very well from an environmental standpoint. Land consumption goes up 15 times. The household VMT, which is based on empirical data, how much do people use cars, also triples, or more, or quadruples actually in this case, out to the suburbs. How many of you know about the Walk Score? It's a computer site you can go to. Only one person, you all got to go. Just look it up, check it out. Check out where you're living. It'll tell you how walkable your neighborhood is. There's now a high correlation between real estate value and walk scores, interestingly enough, across the country. But here's the really profound piece. And these are 3 neighborhoods, all of which are high-end residential. The suburban area in San Ramon is Country Club, highest-end suburb in the Bay Area, of course, other than Palo Alto and a few of the Silicon Valley places. Value per access, convenience, walkability, transit accessibility, these are the things that people need and want in their life today. And we need to build the backbone framework for that to exist. And this kind of thing works in the marketplace. That's the good news. Diverse housing stock, from townhomes to small lot to affordable. But key, of course, is walkable destinations, a community where kids are safe, getting on their bike and going to school and going to the park by themselves. This is what people want. And this is the armature that we need to build for them. What are the impacts? If you go out to the year 2050 and you posit those 2 futures for California, one with high-speed rail, transit infrastructure, and more compact development, one with freeways, airports, and more of the same subdivisions, this is what you get. Interesting thing is you still get over half the housing in California being single family. We're not stealing the American dream, as many conservatives like to argue. But the amount of land consumed drops by 2/3. Now, for most environmentalists, this is a significant number. For people who care about farmland preservation and habitat preservation, this is a very significant number. As a matter of fact, that 5,600, which is, yeah, this has got all screwed up, sorry, 5,600 square miles of new development in this kind of standard growth future for California. Just to put that as an order of magnitude, today, California's urban footprint is 5,300 square miles. So this says by the year 2050, if we continue as per our historic pattern, we will double our physical footprint on the land. The environmental implications are huge. But the fiscal implications run parallel and reinforce this phenomena. Simple infrastructure, of course, goes way down. The more compact, the more infill we do, the less new infrastructure we build, and the less costly it is. $4,000 per unit. Can I back operations and maintenance? These are all tertiary impacts of what you're meeting here today about. And you have to bring these issues into focus alongside of all the more direct consequences. I think this is the larger message that we have to send about high-speed rail. We get additional revenues. So all of a sudden, the fiscal future of local jurisdictions flip over the moment they start investing in more compact, smart, and transit-oriented growth. And this is what's needed because we see so many of our small cities and counties going underwater financially and fiscally. Building energy consumption goes way down. Our need for new power plants go way down. Why? 4 walls takes more to heat and cool than 2 walls, say, in a townhouse, or 1 wall in a condominium. There's simple geometric phenomena here at work that you can measure pretty simply and pretty directly. For California, water consumption is another huge variable. But these are all linked. People tend to debate these politically as isolated issues. You guys are arguing about for high-speed rail. Somebody else is arguing for ag land preservation. Somebody else is arguing for affordable housing. They need to see that there's this underlying fabric that weaves all these issues tightly together. VMT is reduced by 10,000 vehicle miles per household per year. We don't get back to where we were in the 60s when people really enjoyed driving, but we do a lot better. And that has a huge implication for what? Foreign policy, oil imports, all these kinds of issues, which I know that we talk about when we talk about high-speed rail. But it also boils down to household pocketbook issues. There's over $10,000 of savings here between that smart, on average, per household. This is blending all the expenditures of all the households on their transportation and their utilities. And utilities are low in California. We have a great climate, and we passed a law in the 70s, Title 24, energy conservation has really paid off. The average building in California consumes half the energy of the rest of the state. And then there are even more implications. Somebody mentioned the issue of highway fatalities in comparison to rail. Well, air quality impacts common health, and we can measure the cost savings in that area. There's a whole other one that has to do with obesity and diabetes, which is linked to the amount of everyday exercise we get. A little walking here and there from and to the station can have a big impact on human health. So there are all these issues, and then of course the one that we think about on a global scale, the carbon emissions, multiplied many times over. Don't just calculate the energy and carbon savings of the individual piece of technology. Calculate the impact that will have over a whole range of other considerations. In 1989, we did the regional plan for Portland. It was the first time we linked transit-oriented development with shifting funds to rail as opposed to highways. And the numbers are in. This is VMT per household on average. In 1990, we did the plan. 93, it was adopted. By 96, the average vehicle use started to fall in Portland and has fallen ever since. This is no longer hypothetical. These differences are monumental, meaningful, and of course in Portland it's not as if people have fallen away because they no longer get to build and they're no longer dominated by large lot single family in the suburbs. As a matter of fact, their economy is healthier than most because of this more robust land use pattern. So thank